Item 5, discussion and action on all matters. Actually, before we leave item 4, we actually need to mention that we're going to have a dedication for the spur, and I believe we already have the date set. Is that correct, Raymond?
That's correct. April 27th at 10 a.m.
So we're kind of letting the board know today. I'm sorry that we haven't put this out. We've just come up with this date here recently. We anticipate that we will have Congressman Reyes, as well as Mayor Cook, Amadeus Saenz, Commissioner Houghton, a whole host of dignitaries, and really look forward to that dedication and grand opening and of the final project. So look forward to that. Item 5, discussion and action on all matters incident and related to the issuance and delivery of Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority pass-through toll transportation revenue refunding bonds, Series 2011, including the adoption of a bond resolution and approval of a form of supplemental indenture relating hereto. And Mr. Tejas, you're going to explain this to us, right?
I'm going to pass it over, actually.
To Mr. Placide, there we go. So.
That's right. Well, just by way of background, if you'll recall, at last month's board meeting, an opportunity has arisen for the RMA to potentially refund a portion of the state Spur 601 interloop bonds that were issued in 2008. What we did for the board last month was brief you on the opportunity and told you all that we were going to ask our advisors, actually asked for authorization for our advisors to evaluate the opportunity and come back with a recommendation for action. So with that, today we have with us our financial advisors, First Southwest, and also our bond counsel, Fulbright Jaworski. And I believe that Mr. Wayne Placide is going to provide some details on the opportunity and a recommendation. I should also mention as well that yesterday the Finance Committee met and heard this presentation, and I believe they did take an action which we can discuss once Mr. Placide has provided his presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Placide.
Thank you, Raymond. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Wayne Placide. I'm with First Southwest Company, and we serve as your financial advisor. I think you have as was mentioned earlier, we talked with you last month regarding this opportunity. Barclay Capital submitted a proposal, a refunding proposal for your 2008 series bonds. It's about $43 million in terms of size. We've since receiving that proposal, examined it, and looked at other alternatives in terms of evaluation. I think what you have before you is a summary sheet that we prepared, which sort of summarizes our analysis. And as was mentioned by Mr. Burnett, in reviewing our analysis, we looked at the minimum and maximum pass-throughs that you could possibly receive, and sound like you're pretty close to the maximum. But if you look at the left-hand column that says semi-annual pass-throughs and the defeasance, in examining the refunding, one of the things that we realized is that once you refund the bonds, they would have a call that would prohibit you from calling bonds until 2018. And the reason why that's critical is because your pass-throughs, particularly if they're coming in at the maximal level, is going to generate a lot of excess surplus revenue for you. Probably the highest and best use of those funds is to call bonds. And as you call bonds, you reduce your interest payment. And ultimately, with respect to the structure that we have here, any funds remaining after the bonds are paid off are shared between you and Abrams. And so the greater amount of money that's available, the greater amount of money that would be available to the Camino Real RMA. So our goal in looking at these, the refunding and any other transaction is what structure, what transaction will ultimately result in the largest amount of surplus money once the bonds are paid off. We looked at basically just using the surplus money just to retire bonds as quickly as possible. And the defeasance that you see there summarizes that. If you're receiving the minimal, 15.6, the very 4-column from the end, funds dispersed and final maturity. Based upon our analysis, you would end up with about $14.7 million in surplus money just by paying off bonds as quickly as you can based upon the minimal pass-through. Assuming that your pass-through is the max, which Mr. Burnett said it was approaching that level, 17.5, you would end up with $22.2 million in surplus once the bonds are paid off. The next thing that we looked at was the analysis of the refunding transaction that was prepared by Barclay. And we had refunding with a call in 2018. And again, what that would do is the refunding bonds that you would issue to refund bonds, those bonds could not be recalled until 2018. So any surplus money you had could not be used to retire bonds. That analysis will indicate that if you did the refunding, assuming the minimal pass-through again, that the balance or surplus at the end, once the bonds are paid off, would amount to about $7.7 million. Assuming that the pass-through is at the maximal level, that balance would increase to like 12.7. So again, you're comparing the 12.7 to the 22 million that you would end up with if you didn't do the refunding. The second group of numbers is issuing non-callable bonds would lower the cost of funds. That improves slightly, but not a whole lot. I mean, it's actually reduces. So, based upon our analysis, you would end up with a larger amount of cash if you did not do the refunding. You just proceeded along by retiring the bonds as quickly as you can from the surplus money from the pass-throughs. And our recommendation would be that you not proceed with the refunding. We don't think that's in your best interest.
Questions from the board?
At this point, I would mention as well that this item was brought to the Finance Committee, so Ms. Melendez, who was acting as chair for that committee, I don't know if you all had any comments you'd like to share in terms of what happened at that committee meeting?
Well, we heard that presentation yesterday, and I think we're recommending to the board to really hold tight, I think, and just
And follow the
pay back
defeasance.
bonds as quickly as possible. And so we're going with a recommendation from our financial consultants.
Right, and if I understood properly, this makes perfect sense. But if we have excess funds, we're only able to invest those at maybe 50 basis points. I mean, there's almost no return on excess funds, so it makes a whole lot of sense to pay these bonds down, and there's a much better differential in terms of the use of our money compared to the other process, correct? Absolutely.
You're paying bonds off. It carries interest rate is 5% compared to investing it at 50. So, I mean, the number is, 450 basis points swing difference.
Makes perfect sense to me. Mr. Tejas, what action is required on this?
The action that's being requested today is simply to delete the item and take no action other than perhaps direct the board, direct the staff and consultants to monitor. In fact, this is what we talked about at the committee level, to monitor the original proposal from Barclays to make sure that their proposal doesn't actually eclipse the savings through the defeasance scenario. And secondly, it's also to direct staff to pursue the defeasance scenario. So that would be the request.
Is there a motion required for that?
Yes, I would request that.
And the motion is to continue to monitor the refunding opportunity as well as study the defeasance that our financial advisors have presented today?
It's actually to pursue the defeasance scenario. Sorry.
So a motion to pursue the defeasance scenario, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Placide, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 6, discussion and action on various board resolutions related to the Loop 375 Cesar Chavez Border Highway Managed Lanes Project. Mr. Tejas?
Yes, Raymond Tejas, Executive Director. I think that it might be best if we take all all of the items listed under 6 together, and I'd like to give a summary of how they all work together, and then we can go through them individually, should you be interested. And I should mention that the backup for these items was provided to you all late yesterday, and I apologize for that, but each of these items was being negotiated with TxDOT up until late last night, and in fact with a final conclusion this morning. So it took a lot longer than we had anticipated, so I apologize for the late delivery, but because of that, certainly should you want to go through each of the agreements, we can do that. I would mention, though, that what's driving this is that, as we'll talk about in a later item, this project was let by TxDOT, and the bids came in early April, and the Transportation Commission of TxDOT is looking to award late this month. So we really have to have these items completed before the end of the month, and I'm trying to avoid a special meeting of the RMA board. So with that as the backdrop, that explains the delay, and I apologize for that again, but we can take as much time as you all would need. So anyhow, what we're talking about here under item number 6 are various board resolutions relating to Loop 375 Cesar Chavez Border Highway Managed Lanes Project. A deals with the amended and restated market valuation agreement, including business terms and conditions. B deals with, and I'm reading these into the record so we can discuss them collectively. B deals with a resolution regarding the right to develop, finance, construct, and operate the project, commonly referred to as the exercise of primacy. And C deals with a resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a First Amendment to the financial assistance agreement for the project. So by way of background then, and dealing with A first, with any toll project that's being pursued in the state of Texas, you have to go through what's referred to as a market valuation process currently, and that's a requirement by state statute. And we've gone through certain steps of that before. As you may recall, the terms and conditions developed between TxDOT and the RMA, which really identify the parameters within which the toll project would be developed. Those terms and conditions had been developed and agreed to between the parties last year. And the way that was formalized was through a market valuation agreement that was authorized by this board in, I believe it was October of last year. That market valuation agreement was executed and was then, by statute, sent to the El Paso Metropolitan Planning Organization. That planning organization then created a subcommittee to review those terms and conditions, and all of this is required by state statute. That subcommittee was comprised of the chair, who was City Representative Beto O'Rourke, State Representative Joe Pickett, and our new county judge, Veronica Escobar. Those three members met, I believe, 4 times over the course of the last few months, and eventually forwarded a recommendation to the full Transportation Policy Board, which is the governing board of the El Paso MPO, on April 1st. And that recommendation was eventually adopted by the El Paso MPO's board. That recommendation, and in fact the motion of the El Paso MPO, was to approve of the business terms and conditions as developed by TxDOT and the MPO and as approved by this board. They were approved subject to one additional condition, and that condition was to add a provision that noted, if in fact the toll revenue generated by the managed lanes portion of the project did not pay for all of the costs related to the collection of those tolls within 15 years from commencement, or rather opening of the project, or 2028, whichever is later, then those managed lanes would revert back to being a non-toll facility and would be operated by the state of Texas. So to summarize again, the business terms and conditions were adopted by the MPO, or rather were approved by the MPO, subject to this additional condition, which basically says the managed lanes would revert to a non-tolled facility if the toll revenue did not cover the toll expenses by within 15 years of opening or 2028.
Was there also some language in there if they paid off early?
Yes, sir, and I'm glad you mentioned that. That was a concession that we requested and the committee and Transportation Policy Board accepted, which was, if in fact these revenues cover expenses prior to 2015, that reversion provision expires. And that's important because the intent from the RMA's point of view, the intent of this project is really to provide the beginning of system financing, and we'd be able to, once that reversion provision goes away, then we'd actually be able to use this project to finance additional projects. And clearly, we couldn't do that while that provision is in place.
With the intention of this really being the first leg of the Southern Relief Route, so is what we're looking at doing. So,
Exactly.
any other discussion? Is there questions on item A?
I have a question for Raymond. Raymond, how are they measuring that, annually, or is it another?
Annually. Yes, sir. Annual revenues would drive that provision.
Okay.
Any questions on item A? If not, is there a motion on item A authorizing executive director to execute the amended and restated market valuation agreement? Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Item B, Mr. Tejas?
That takes us to this second item, which deals with primacy. Also required by that same statute is a requirement that, well, I should back it up. Within that same statute, there is a provision that identifies who in a local area has the first option to pursue a toll project. And currently, under the statute that we're operating now, it states that regional mobility authorities have the first option to pursue a toll project. And the way that works is that we are required to essentially exercise primacy over the development, the construction, the finance, and the operation of the project. So what you see before you as item 6B is a board resolution that is essentially exercising primacy for this project to begin the project, but I will note that we're actually exercising what's referred to as conditional primacy, in that what we are anticipating, what you see in the recitals and also the body of the actual resolution, is that we are stating outright that the intent between TxDOT and the RMA is that TxDOT will develop the project, including design, will procure it, will construct it, and will manage the majority of the finances related to the construction of the project. At the back end, once the construction is completed within approximately 2 years, the RMA has exercised conditional primacy, which essentially is saying we intend to operate it if X, Y, and Z happens. And you'll see the X, Y, and Z in there, which essentially amount to, does it make financial sense for the Regional Mobility Authority? Does the project still make sense once it's been constructed, and how it's been constructed, and along those lines? So essentially what we're doing here is we're checking a box required by statute to say, yes, the RMA is exercising primacy to develop and operate the project. However, the RMA and TxDOT will execute a project development agreement very soon that will establish the rights and responsibilities of each party. And we currently, as of right now, are anticipating the responsibilities to divide whereby TxDOT will do all of the work up front, and we will manage the project once it opens. So that's what you see before you as 6B.
Mr. Calvo, do you have anything to add to that particular conversation? Just for clarification.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eduardo Calvo with TxDOT here at El Paso. First of all, what Mr. Tejas has described has been really, first let me thank Raymond for his help and getting all these different agreements. The three pieces that you're seeing right now, it's taken a long time to develop, and as he said, even late last night finalizing, or even this morning when you got the final. So we certainly appreciate that, and you can also blame it on us that you didn't get it on, early to review.
Well, I can tell you it was rather amazing how quickly all these projects came together, and TxDOT, it's amazing how all these projects got done and let, so I think you deserve big kudos for making that happen. So.
No, thank you. Specifically, I don't have much to add other than that again, it's taken a while to negotiate and to, first of all, understand the process. As Mr. Tejas said, going through the market valuation process with the MPO and the toll committee, the 4 grueling meetings that we had with them, it was very helpful. But again, it took a long time. It was a lot of information that they were asking of us, but we finally concluded that. Specifically to the documents, other than what Mr. Tejas said, I don't have anything much to add other than to thank him again.
So just to clarify, we're asserting primacy or conditional primacy on the entire project?
We are exerting conditional primacy on the entire project.
And then basically, TxDOT's going to come in and develop and construct it, and then at some point down the road, we're going to look at the managed lanes, the operational part of that, and determine primacy on that piece.
That's correct. Now in terms of the statutory requirements, and as we've worked out with TxDOT's attorneys, we are exercising conditional primacy for the entire project right now, with the intention and the understanding that we will exercise a project development agreement very soon with TxDOT that would divide those rights and responsibilities. And that's where the design, construction, and all of the other work will fall to TxDOT, and the potential for us to operate the facility will fall to us.
Okay. Mr. Calvo, are we correct in that understanding?
Yes, sir, that's our understanding. We really would like to start the negotiations on the PDA, on the project development agreement, which, as Mr. Taya said, will spell out the detailed roles and responsibilities of the RMA and TxDOT. And since we're already starting with that, I think it's a good idea to get it started as soon as possible.
While Mr. Calvo's on the podium, is there any questions for Mr. Calvo?
No.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Raymond? If not, can I ask for a motion regarding the right to develop, finance, construct, and operate the project commonly referred to as an exercise of primacy?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. 6C, authorizing executive director to execute a First Amendment to a financial assistance agreement for the project. Mr. Tejas.
Now, this one obviously they're all related. This deals with the financing and how the project will get funded. Some of you all may recall that last year I came to you all with a financial assistance agreement between the RMA and TxDOT, and that financial assistance agreement said that the RMA would develop and construct and operate this project, and the RMA had access to $80,250,000 to develop the project. So that gave the RMA access to the funds that we needed to begin all of the work necessary to actually construct the project. After that event, you all may recall that we entered into negotiations with TxDOT in terms of what is the fastest and most efficient, the best way for the community to get not only the Cesar Chavez project done, but the Trans Mountain Northeast and also the Zaragoza project. And as a result of that, we redefined the role of the RMA through the Comprehensive Mobility Plan as really mainly one of a financing arm. So what you see in that change is actually what you see in this revision to the financial assistance agreement is really then dividing again the roles of the RMA versus TxDOT. And in this case, the financial assistance agreement had to be amended so that TxDOT had access to that $80.25 million so that they could pursue the project, and then the RMA kept access to about $2.4 million, which would allow us to do oversight, would help us develop that project development agreement, would help us make the determination necessary so that we can determine whether or not the RMA should, in fact, operate the facility once it's constructed in 2 years. So really what you see then is the original FAA granted $80.25 million to the RMA so we could develop the project. Since then, TxDOT and the RMA have decided that TxDOT should actually develop the project. So what we're doing here is amending the original FAA to go back and carve out about $2.4 million for the RMA to do its due diligence in this bridge period between now and the opening of the facility, with the remainder of those $80.25 million worth of project funds turned back to TxDOT so they can actually complete the project. So that's what you see before you.
And in that $2.4 million, there's a number of tasks that would have to be completed either by TxDOT or us. We're just completing those as part of our due diligence. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. It's actually two types of services. One are the due diligence services that the RMA needs to do in order to make its determination of whether or not the RMA should operate the facility once it's open. And then secondarily, there are various tasks that either the RMA or TxDOT will pursue. And if the RMA pursues them, then we will pull from that $2.4 million. It's a not to exceed amount, and the details really will come in the form of the project development agreement, and that's where we divide up the responsibilities of each party.
And that'll come to the board. But I just wanted to clarify that the $2.4 million is not all due diligence. There's a number of required services, and depending on how the project progresses, it's a not to exceed number, correct?
That's correct.
Any questions for Mr. Tejas?
just one, on the 2.4 million, that has been broken out. I mean, how did you come up with the 2.4 million?
We worked with our general engineering consultant to develop a scope, and it was really kind of a difficult task because we're trying to look into the future to identify all of the potential services and tasks that we would need to complete between now and the opening of the facility. So some of it really is kind of guesswork, I should say, but that's why we structured it as a not to exceed. Now, clearly, we're only going to pull the funds for the services that we actually need to do, and beyond that, it anticipates a further conversation in more detail with TxDOT to determine who's actually doing what, and that will then give us the final amount that we'll actually use.
When do you anticipate we'd be able to kind of define those additional funds and how that 2.4 and how they'd be able, what the scope of those funds are going to be used for?
Well, honestly, I hope to be back to you in May with that. I think that we need to do it as quickly as possible. To kind of give the parameters here, TxDOT let the project, meaning that they opened the bids in early April, and I believe that you all received a copy of the press release related to the savings and the awards that were, or I'm sorry, the bids that were opened. The Transportation Commission of TxDOT is looking to award late this month on April 28th. So we're really in a compressed timeline. Everything has fallen into place. It's my opinion that we need to have this in place as quickly as possible because there are a number of services that need to begin once the award has happened, and more importantly, once a notice to proceed is issued by TxDOT. So I'm hopeful that we can negotiate this and finalize it with TxDOT within the month.
And once we have pretty much an understanding of what we're going to be doing, we already have all that spelled out with our GEC, PBS&J, which is now
Atkins Global.
Atkins Global, formerly known as PBS&J. It'll
Atkins
take me a
North
while,
America,
so
excuse me. Atkins North America.
Atkins North America. So we have all that spelled out. So we'll be able to bring that to the board and clarify that.
And in fact, what you'll see is not only the project development agreement between the RMA and TxDOT, you'll also see a work authorization between the RMA and the general engineering consultant, which we do for every task that we have. So that's where you'll actually see the explicit detail.
So you see the detail and have a lot of opportunity to ask questions and make sure you're comfortable with how that money's being spent. Any other questions for Mr. Tejas? With that said, is there a motion authorizing the executive director to execute the First Amendment to a financial assistance agreement for the project?
And actually, I would clarify for the record, we're actually, through these negotiations with TxDOT, we're actually doing an amended and restated financial assistance agreement to replace the original financial assistance agreement as opposed to the original First Amendment to it. Ultimately, it's just a change in language on the agenda caption. The intent remains the same.
So it's an amended and restated financial assistance agreement?
That's correct.
So the motion should read, item C, authorizing the executive director to execute an amended and restated financial assistance agreement for the project.
That's correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Item 7, presentation and discussion of the 2030 committee report by CRRMA board member and 2030 committee member, Mr. David Marcus. Mr. Marcus?
We're asking Mr. Marcus to come down to the podium and provide his presentation. As a reminder to the board, the 2030 committee was created by the Texas Transportation Commission, and I'll let Mr. Marcus detail the reason and the scope behind that. But Mr. Marcus served as the vice chair of that 2030 committee, so he's here to present the results.
Good morning. I'm changing hats for just a few minutes here, and I know Jim's got an appointment in a little while, so I'm going to try and get through this in less than a couple hours. So just bear with me. I would like to also first apologize to Susan and Jim and whoever else, Raymond, for missing yesterday's Finance Committee meeting. I now understand you have to look at your calendars in the morning, and I didn't, but the good part of that is I got an extraordinary amount of work done yesterday, and I do appreciate that. In September 1858, it took the first stagecoach traveling the new Butterfield Trail Overland Trail 25 days to get from St. Louis to San Francisco, and that included 8 difficult days in Texas, including traveling right through here, El Paso, Texas. It was highly praised for its dependable service. However, less than 3 years later, the United States Congress passed legislation that transferred the line from Texas to a more northern route. It became just too difficult to deal with the dangers inherent in this part of the world. and another part of the country became a more attractive route. That was one of our first lessons in economic competitiveness, and it wouldn't be our last. For those that don't know, in addition to being a sitting board member on this Transportation Authority, I've also been serving on the Texas 2030 Committee, originally convened by the chair of the Texas Transportation Commission in 2008. We issued our first report in 2009, and in July 2010, Chairperson DeLisi, reconvened the 2030 Committee. The original committee had 12 members, and this time around we had 10 members still serving all sections of the state. And I'm going to, how do I change the slides? As you can see, they represent people from all across the state of Texas. We were well represented. We had Odessa and El Paso. Though Mr. Crutcher in Odessa kept referring to himself as coming from West Texas, and I had to keep reminding him that he was in East Texas for me. It was just a slip of the tongue, I'm sure. We had at our disposal a team of researchers from the Texas Transportation Institute, the Center for Transportation Research, the University of Texas at Austin, and UT San Antonio. And I might add, if you have any questions at all about this data that I'm going to show you or how it was arrived at, I have an appendix available showing the sources of this data, and our research team is available to the 2030 Committee through the end of this year. So we can answer just about any question anybody might have. Last July, we were charged with developing an updated analysis of the current state of the transportation system in Texas, determining the household costs of underinvesting in the system and identifying potential revenue options to fund improvements. This updated report examines pavement and bridge conditions, urban congestion, and rural connectivity between cities in Texas for 2015, 2019, and 2035. The report goes on to lay out 3 improved transportation quality scenarios over and above what we would have if we continued today's scenario. It lays out the funding required for each and the resulting transportation system conditions. The 2030 Committee also identified a set of Texas transportation action principles that state, regional, and local leaders should consider in assessing and determining our priorities. Our priorities for this report were that local and state officials should be the ones that decide what projects should be developed or how the money should be spent. That was not a part of our report and not something we addressed. We obviously agreed that preserving the infrastructure was the top priority. If we didn't do that, the deferred maintenance cost would be enormous. We had to ensure that whatever was done would result in a maximum bang for our dollars, and displaying our results and being accountable to the public would be the only way we would be able to accomplish this. We involved everyone in the solution: commuters, employers, carriers, shippers, manufacturers. We wanted to attack the problems as they occurred, and we wanted to be able to seize on opportunities if we saw an idea that supported economic development. And we also realized that future transportation system in Texas was going to require users to pay for the services they consume. We have 4 grades. We started with F, and we go to D, C, and B. Understand there is no A here because Texas can't afford A. We knew that. If we continued, each one of these, by the way, represent cost scenarios that could be between $4 billion and $10.8 billion per year between 2011 and 2035. The scenarios range from doing nothing new to maintaining conditions as they are now. If you look at the top one, F, unacceptable conditions, that's what would happen if we continued funding our transportation system at the same level as we are today. The report makes it clear Texans will have to pay more for their transportation system, either through relatively modest increases in taxes and fees to improve the system, or through additional vehicle use and operating costs as a result of deteriorating roads and bridges and increased traffic congestion. If you look at this next chart, it has the average annual transportation cost per household in Texas as it goes up from 2011 to 2035. And if you the orange part and the I guess the color is green, it depends what your screen is showing. Those top sections represent wasted fuel, wasted time, and increased maintenance costs on vehicles. The bottom part in blue in each of the 4 different scenarios represents taxes and fees that a household would normally pay. Under today's scenario, which is the one on the far left, we pay an average of $232 per household in taxes and fees. In what we think of as the best scenario on the far right, we would pay $634, almost 3 times as much in taxes and fees, but we're quantifying the total transportation cost per household to drop substantially if we do that, because we'll be allowing the state to spend more money on the system. So our transportation costs drop from over $6,000 a year to about $3,600 a year. And stop me if you have any questions at all.
I got a quick question. Was air quality considered? Because in this community, it's
Air quality was considered, quality of life was considered, lost time was considered, and we factored in not just individuals, but we've factored in the cost of shipping goods, the cost of moving a gallon of milk from San Antonio to Dallas, the price to make the milk, assuming it was a stable price over the next 20 or 25 years, would still cost the consumer substantially more in 25 years because the cost to move it on our interstate system would go way, way up as the system deteriorated. And you all know better than anybody, if the roads are in bad shape, you're going to have to pay more to maintain the trucks. The trucks are going to have to move slower, and it's just going to cost everybody a lot more money. I had our researchers, and by the way, this particular chart takes the 4 conditions and quantifies it down to the average, the total investment that we're estimating it would take to do that for the state of Texas, and then the average cost per household. And as you can see, the average cost per household goes way up under B, but the total cost that you saw in the previous chart goes way down. I had our researchers go back and do some research for me to give you guys an idea of how this would impact El Paso. And if you look at this, we go from an average of 11 hours in delays annually per commuter with an estimated congestion cost of close to $225 per household per year to a congestion level that more than doubles that by 2035. And an increase in and a corresponding increase in average congestion cost. If we continue the current level funding in the state of Texas, in our grade F, by the year 2035, the average household in Texas, in El Paso, Texas, could end up with an estimated total transportation cost of $3,640. The numbers are different than the ones you saw for the whole state. They actually went back and recomputed these based on the existing population center and the estimates of growth in El Paso. Under that $3,640, $200 would be taxes and fees. The rest would be wasted fuel, cost of time, increased vehicle maintenance, and all of the other cost of quality of life issues that go into making that up. Corresponding to that, if the state funds at levels approaching our grade of B, though an average family would only spend $2,700 a year, their taxes and fees would rise to $525 a year. And the next slide shows the estimated total investment by grade for the El Paso region. The report provides a number of possible funding options to raise the revenue required to fund the transportation system, including capturing existing highway revenue that's currently been diverted to other sources. Somebody asked me what that meant. That means money that was coming in and designated for TxDOT ends up paying for something else in the Texas budget. It happened all the time. It's happened every year. Charging additional taxes and fees to individuals and companies, generating funds through defined projects such as toll roads, and raising funds for projects at the local community level. The report also noted that Texans currently pay less in transportation fees than the residents of 43 other U.S. states. The majority of Texas roadways were built more than 40 years ago and are reaching the end of their design life. This, combined with significant declines in transportation funding for maintenance and construction of new roads, plus our state's rapid population and job growth, have created a perfect storm for our transportation system. And we have to begin to address those challenges now to keep Texas competitive in the future. What does that all mean for us? To put it in perspective, the impact from inadequate highway funding here in El Paso for both individuals and corporations is huge. The role that highways play in keeping us connected to the rest of the state and the increase in the per mile cost of staying connected with the rest of Texas is going to make it more expensive for individuals and companies based in El Paso to move around the state and remain competitive. This could even impact trade across our border, making it more feasible to move that trade through other border gateways. What happens in state highway funding could affect us in El Paso more than other large cities in the state because of the role that highways play in keeping the city part of the state economic engine. What's next? We need to give input to our local elected leaders, help them to better understand this problem, help them educate their constituency so they can feel good about voting for better funding for transportation. If you're okay with what the future looks like, bad roads, detours around closed bridges, congestion, then there's no need to do anything at all. We can sit back and watch as another lesson in economics is dealt to us, similar to what happened when the Butterfield Trail route got moved 150 years ago. If we're not satisfied with that, we need to start discussing options to build an action plan. We do have a choice. We can begin highlighting the fact that the 85-mile-an-hour speed limit bill, being co-sponsored by our own Representative Joe Pickett, is totally dependent on the quality of the interstate you're traveling on. I don't know about you, but I would hate to hit that pothole that TxDOT couldn't afford to fix while moving at 85 miles an hour. At that speed, you won't see the pothole, and we won't be seeing you again. Thank you.
David, thank you.
Are there any questions?
Is the 2030 committee, are they continuing to meet, and are they continuing to work on this? And how are they getting this message out to Texans?
Getting the message out was the big challenge, and still is. No, we're not meeting anymore. We completed our mission a week and a half ago in Austin at the commission meeting by presenting this report. And I have executive summaries, which are in your packet, but I also have a full copy of the full report. I'm happy to email it to any of you. I didn't print it. It's a lot of paper. It's probably important to read that. If nothing else, my picture's in it, and but no, we're not meeting anymore. We were tasked with going around the state and trying to educate the public and getting the word out. And it did. The original report, when it was issued about a week and a half ago, did get out. It was reported not only across the state of Texas, but it was reported in other large cities around the United States, except here. We were notably one of the only cities that didn't have any media report on the report. So it's a challenge. The guy on the street, if you go talk to him today and you say we need more toll roads or we need to start charging people to drive to use their car per mile, they don't understand that. They're used to the system the way we had it in the 60s when we grew up. Texas needed a road. TxDOT built it. We didn't even worry about it. We didn't pay for it. The only way we paid for it was through pennies per gallon in our gas tax. But that's becoming irrelevant as well. The average miles per gallon in the 60s was 8, 10 maybe. Now it's 18 across the state. We've done well. They're estimating that by 2030, the average miles per gallon, fleet miles per gallon, including trucks, is going to exceed 38 to 42 miles a gallon because of the preponderance of electric vehicles, hybrids, and high mileage alternatives. So what's going to happen? That means even with an increase in population in the state, we most likely will be selling fewer gallons of gas. There's another reason. The guys in the Middle East that are selling us the crude oil understand that they have a finite number of barrels of oil in the ground. And as they see our economy improve, their price is going to go up. It already is. You're seeing it now. It's going to continue to go up. I'm anticipating $7 a gallon gas within the next 60 months. In addition to that, this legislator is going to have to consider raising the gas tax for the first time in many, many years, and it could be a substantial raise. So what's going to happen is people here are going to pay a lot more for gas, and for the part of our community that lives on the edge, literally, maybe a family of 4 or 5 people, they're working hard, they're barely making enough money to buy the gas they need to get to their jobs now. When that gas price doubles or goes up even more, where are they going to get the money to pay for that? They're not. It poses all kinds of challenges for us, and maybe more for us than any other city in the state, and that's what I'm trying to tell people. We don't have the alternative methods of, we don't have an alternative form of transportation here. If you go to other cities, they do. You can take light rail all over Dallas if you want to. You don't really need a car there anymore. And it ultimately, even though it's very, very expensive, and it doesn't make economic sense to build that here because of our urban sprawl, at some point we're going to have to take a hard look at that.
Great.
David, did they have comparisons of the other cities and other communities in Texas? I know you said that you had them do this research, but are different areas also broken down like you showed us for El Paso?
No. The reason we did it for El Paso is because El Paso is so different, and El Paso is so isolated, and the numbers came up different, as you can see, quite substantially different. The forecast for El Paso is different. What's going to happen here? They've said this publicly. Our roads are in great shape thanks to these guys, and they're not deteriorating, and we don't have any bad weather, so we don't need as many maintenance dollars out here either. That's a strong feeling in Austin, and one that we're going to need some really, really strong leaders going to Austin to battle that, because their thought is, even at its very worst, grade F, our congestion is not going to be as bad as it is today in Houston, for instance, and in parts of Austin. So the state report, the overall state report, and the numbers I gave you on that really do apply to some of the major cities, including Austin, Houston, and Dallas. They obviously didn't apply to El Paso, and so that's why I had them go back and run those for me.
So it's only in what you're presenting, it's not in
That's right.
the actual report?
No. The national report and the report I send you, if you want a copy of it, does not have any of the slides on El Paso in there.
Thank you.
Raymond, can we put a copy of that on the RMA website?
I'm sure we can. Yeah, absolutely. I'll speak with
I'll send Raymond a copy of both the appendix and the full report, and he can post it.
Right. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Item 8, discussion and action on the Executive Director's Report. A, update on Loop 375 at FM 659, the Zaragoza and 375 Northeast Mainline projects. Raymond?
Yes, Raymond Tejas, Executive Director again. I'll be very brief with item 8, the Director's Report. I wanted to brief the board on the 2 remaining comprehensive mobility plan projects that the RMA is involved in, the Zaragoza Direct Connectors and Northeast Main Lane projects. As we discussed a little bit earlier, TxDOT has let these projects, which means that the bids have come in, and they've come in a lot lower than the original estimate, which I think is really good news. For the Northeast Main Lane projects, the low bid came in at $49.6 million, whereas the estimate was at 59.7, so that's quite a savings there. The Zaragoza Direct Connector project, the estimate was at 26 million, and the bid came in at 25.5 million. So
The
there's
estimates are just construction costs. Is that
construction only. That's right. But if you recall, this plays into the RMA's role in these projects because the revised approach to develop the comprehensive mobility plan projects has the RMA in the financing role. So the RMA, and actually it plays a bigger role in that the determination of the actual construction amount then drives the needed project funds for the project, obviously. So that means then that if there's less funds that are necessary, that may rework how the RMA structures the financing for those projects. And really, I just wanted to share those bids with you. I also wanted to share with you that at last month's Transportation Commission meeting, the TTC gave final approval for the two pass-through toll agreements that we had requested for the Northeast and the Zaragoza project. So that process is complete now. Of course, that approval was contingent upon the execution, the final approval and execution of two state infrastructure bank loans, one for Northeast and one for Zaragoza as well. Now that final approval hopefully will be on the Transportation Commission meeting of this month. So I'll be back in Austin on April 28th for hopefully the final approval of those SIB loans.
And as the board remembers, those SIB loans can be paid back by the TRZ. So there's a lot of moving parts that we'll kind of take a look at and see how those excess funds are going to be applied. And I've got to commend Raymond. He's been putting a lot of late nights in. I got an email from him last night at 10 o'clock. I get several of those, and so there's been a lot of different things going on. And Raymond's been working diligently to make sure the RMA, the city, and all our partners are on the same page. So, Raymond, thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Again, I just wanted to share that, and I think you summed it up quite well, that there are a lot of moving parts, but everything seems to be moving forward at least. So that's a very good thing. So that's A. Item B is the Team Texas meeting. Team Texas has 3 meetings a year, and this last one was in Austin on March 24th and 25th, and I attended that. As you may recall, I'm a committee co-chair for the legislative committee of that organization, and actually it was a really good meeting. That organization has several classifications of members, including tolling entities like us, and then also vendor organizations such as engineers and tolling aggregators and other industry folks. We have a general meeting which includes all, and then a board meeting of the local the tolling entities, and we had both of those this year. At this last meeting, very productive. I think that's one of the best meetings that I think we can attend to see what the other RMAs are doing throughout the state. Not only the other RMAs, but North Texas Tolling Authority, NTTA, and also HECTRA out of Houston attends portions of those meetings as well. So it's a really good place for all of us to get together and see what everybody else is doing throughout the state. This one, obviously, because of the date and location, the focus was really the legislative process and what bills are coming out of the House and Senate currently, what we're anticipating, and what issues may be arising. So it was really very helpful, I think, for everyone. Beyond that, the next meeting is currently proposed for Dallas in mid-May to coincide with the IBTTA organization's meeting, which is scheduled for Dallas, and I believe it's May 18th around that date. The IBTTA is the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association, and obviously that's an organization that we keep tabs on as well. So the Team Texas organization is dovetailing with the IBTTA meeting in May. And I'll send that information out to all of you all as well to see if anyone is interested in attending that May meeting. So that's item B, subject to your questions, of course. Otherwise, item C is the 2010 RMA annual report, and I've provided 5 copies to each of you all. Obviously, we have many more. We printed 250 this year, and we'll make distributions to all of the local elected officials and community organizations that we're teamed up with, and we'll make those available to the public. We also will post that online along with all of our other publications. So, subject to your questions, that's all I have for you today.
Any questions for Raymond?
Oh, great looking piece. Looks good, really.
Oh, I'm glad. Well, and we have plenty of copies, so if you need any, if you have organizations that would like a few, let me know, and I'll send them out.
Great. Raymond, thanks for all your assistance. I believe that we've got everything covered today. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? We are adjourned on April 13th at 10:13 a.m. Thank you.